Hello and welcome back to the GI Podcast. I am your host, Sid Heeg.
And I am Toben Racicot.
And today we are joined by Dr. Emma Vossen, who is the Research Communications Officer here at the GI, and has been a part of the first generation of graduate students here at the GI as well. And it's been very impressive that she has not yet been featured on the GI Podcast. So
there's reasons for that.
Emma.
Welcome.
Hi, Sid and Toben. Thank you for having me.
Oh, fabulous.
We always play a game with our guests that's like, how far back in the origin of this space are you?
Oh,
so typically it's like, are you pre-Alex Fleck or post-Alex Fleck?
Oh, very pre-Alex
okay.
Fleck.
That was always like the one...
the marker.
Yeah,
Let me
marker.
tell you a secret.
Yeah.
I'm technically pre-Agata.
Cool.
On a very technical level. Don't tell Agata that. Agata, if you're listening, you didn't hear that.
Okay, so we'd like to start with a general question. This is something that we do with all of our guests, is what was your first experience with games? This can be video games, board games, card games, anything about games.
That is hard to remember because for as long as I can remember, I have been obsessed with games. So I have a lot of games memories to think back on. I would say one of my earliest memories was that we picked up at a garage sale, like my mom with my brother and I, a Commodore 64 with a case of floppy disks for the Commodore 64. And they were unlabeled. And my brother and I would just go through them, just put it in. And sometimes we had no idea what it was and we'd just take it out and whatever. And every once in a while it would be like, oh, this is the Commodore 64 version of Pitfall.
Right.
Oh my word.
Or something like that. So that's actually like the first game I think I remember playing is Pitfall. And sometimes I would like try to demonstrate to my students how much games have changed by being like, you know, the first game I ever played looked like this, and now this is what games look like. But I don't know if that actually really worked. I think it just made them feel like I was really old.
That's interesting.
But in reality, it is that like by the time the fact that was the first game I played, and by the time I was like 10, it was, you know, Doom and Myst and stuff. Like, you know, stuff really escalated very quickly in that time.
Yeah, even now, right? If we went back 10 years...
Like, that's when I would say
so
10
like
years ago is when they were ramping up with the hyper-realism.
Yeah,
and
like
the
it was
big narrative
CS3.
games.
The first Last
and
of
then that
Us.
just kind of shot
right?
through the big Last of Us.
Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah. Red Dead Redemption, the first one came out in 2010, and that was kind of like the precursor to what we were eventually
and like The
gonna get in
Witcher 3
mid-2010s.
would have also been
2017.
Okay, that was a little
Yeah.
bit
It's more recent than you think.
Yeah.
But even, right, if you go to The Last of Us Part 1 and
Yeah.
then like Cyberpunk,
Yeah.
right, maybe less noticeable, but more in some ways. I don't know. Ray tracing helps out a lot.
Yeah,
I think,
but they were just, now we're getting to these games that are just so massive that you're making them for the next generation of consoles. So then it's like, I felt like the latest Xbox just came out like last year.
Yeah. Were you a Nintendo person, Sega person, Sony person?
I was definitely a Nintendo kid, which is probably not surprising since anyone who knows me knows I'm like a diehard Zelda fan. But you know, I played PC games, and you know, as soon as the PlayStation 1 came out, like we were playing that. So I've always kind of had I didn't have every console because we just couldn't afford that, but I've always sort of been like a dabbler. Well, you know, being probably mostly a Nintendo loyalist.
And was it your parents who were like, hey, this is a cool form of recreation? Did you have older siblings that were like, hey, my paycheck is going towards this?
So it's actually weirdly almost like the reverse. Like,
Okay.
I think that...
You were the one like collecting bottles and mowing lawns?
No,
that was my history.
No, not even that. It was just that my brother, like I had a younger brother who's 3 years younger than me. And, you know, he was a big nerd, and my parents like bought games like mostly for my brother.
Very weird.
And then my brother had this friend who was also really into games, and my brother and I got along really well. So I would hang out with him and we'd play the games together. And because I was 3 years older, oftentimes there were stuff that he couldn't do.
Right.
That I
is
could
interesting,
do.
yeah.
So I would, you know, a lot of time, like we spent a lot of time playing games where I would be playing and he would be giving input, or we'd like swap back and forth.
Right.
So I think a lot, like having studied gender and those sorts of things, like, my parents weren't intentionally doing anything different than any other 90s parents, but they weren't going to like buy me a Game Boy.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
called a Game Boy,
Yeah.
you know?
Not a game girl, obviously.
Yeah. So I think all the time that like, I think if there was one thing that could have changed about my entire life that would have made my entire life go in a different direction, it would have been having a sister.
Yeah.
Because I think if like I'm at now, my whole life has been about games. And if I had a sister, I don't think that would be true.
That's fascinating. Because
Yeah.
in my family, so I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. And my
Yeah.
sisters were all like the heavy gamers.
Yeah.
They were the ones like buying PlayStations and buying Game Boys for
Wow.
themselves and stuff like that.
Maybe I would have ended up doing that anyway.
Like, because the 90s were weird, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I asked, like, was it your parents? Because my parents were very much like, you want it, you go and you find a way to get
Yeah.
it.
My
That's
parents
why,
were the
like,
exact same
we
way,
collected
yeah.
bottles.
Yeah.
And we would mow lawns to, like, go and rent Super Nintendos for weekends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's cool that, like, it started with the Commodore 64, because obviously, well, maybe it was a good enough deal.
It was a very good deal.
Because again, if I was at a yard sale, my parents would be like, "No, you're getting new shoes. That's what we came here for. We're going home." Like that kind of
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
They're very, but I mean, paying for 7 kids in the 90s was still whatever
Mhm.
it is. Like.
Yeah, it
But-
was just the two of us.
yeah. So you
Probably
have a bit more
difference.
disposable income than we did, and that's the case. So what's the connection between this like childhood of very avid gaming bringing you to game studies at a university level?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because I think my childhood and especially like teenagedom of playing games in a lot of ways actually like pushed me away from that path. Because while I was always playing games and really interested in games, I was also like extremely aware of how like sort of toxic it could be. And in high school, I hung out with like a group of guys that were like, my high school boyfriend's friends. And they would like play Smash and like tear each other to pieces.
Yeah.
And, if anybody was ever anything less than perfect at anything, like, you got the shit taken out of you. And so I was like very, very self-conscious. And then like I'll add on to that, that same high school boyfriend, if I was ever better than him at anything, it was like a crisis.
Weird.
Like
Oh, no.
I remember this like one moment. Do you remember Link's crossbow training?
Uh-huh.
It was just this very stupid Wii game. And somehow, like, he was always better at games than me, but somehow I like had the high score. And I remember just like one night him just staying up until like 3 a.m.
my
to
Grinding
beat
out runs, trying to get it.
just to beat the
Oh,
score.
my goodness.
So I was like very aware of the contrast between like the relationship my brother and I had playing
Yeah.
games, which was like very positive, very like, there was
Collaborative
no
and
very
friendly,
collaborative, like there was no weird gender shit. And then I go hang out with other guys and play games with them. And it was very distinctly like, not even like you're a girl gamer, like you're just a girl.
Right.
Like they would play D&D. I wasn't allowed
Oh,
to join,
wow.
that
Oh.
sort of thing. So that really, when I went to university and I was like taking courses in digital media studies and I was like writing essays about games, but I was like, but I'm not gonna,
Right.
like, I'm not gonna study games because like, as far as I could tell, the people studying games, like it was mostly again like these guys who were acting in this certain way. And it was only when I came to Waterloo to study comics, actually.
I didn't know you were a comics fan.
Yeah.
Add another 10 questions here, Sid. We need to talk about, there's more to talk
We
about
gotta
here.
go. Okay, forget the games.
Yeah.
Focus on the
Let's talk about comics
now.
for a little bit. All right,
Yeah,
so
so I
it's my
like-
show now.
I was going to conferences and presenting on my comics research.
amazing.
Wow.
And like that was like, I was like positive, like that was going to be what I
That's so funny.
did.
Because I came to Waterloo with that same idea, and then I got hooked into games.
Yeah.
Was it because of Neil?
Yeah.
Of course it was.
You talk to Neil and you're like, well, maybe I should give up on my
Yeah.
original
Well,
dream.
He
I
is
do
the Witch
games.
King of Angmar. He's come to
I
the
mean,
games.
I do think there's something about Neil, like that gave me more
there's
of
definitely
that
something about Neil.
that vibe, like my brother. Like
Yeah.
it was more like it was more fun,
Yeah.
playful, collaborative. It wasn't this like political
Yes.
gatekeepy. There was no gendered crap. So, basically, how I met Neil was I had a friend who came to do her PhD at Waterloo. And I was considering applying here. So I came to stay with her and she had class with Neil. And so
Classic.
I got her to give me all the readings while she was in her earlier class. Went into the environment building, did all the readings, showed up to Neil's class, and Neil started asking questions, and everyone just sat there silently. So I just put my hand up, and I
yes.
just started. He had no idea who I was.
I mean, even if you were in his class, he still would have known who you were.
Yeah, so I just started answering questions, and Neil and I had like a great conversation,
amazing.
and I really enjoyed my time in his class, and yeah, that just kind of made the decision for me, and then that was like 2011. And yeah, I've been here not ever since, but a lot of the time
Yeah.
since.
So you did your undergrad and master's elsewhere?
Yeah, so my undergrad and masters were both at Carleton.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
Okay. It took a second for me to remember where that was.
yeah, in Ottawa.
Yeah.
For anyone
for
listening.
for
yeah.
non-Ontarians.
Yeah.
So let's focus a bit more about your dissertation work at that time, especially since when you were doing your graduate research at the PhD level,
things were happening.
there was a movement happening, and we're all kind of laughing about it because it's uncomfortable. But it was Gamergate, which was an interesting time online, especially if you were a woman who liked games, and just kind of the backlash that came out of it. So I know your dissertation wasn't necessarily focused on Gamergate, but how did that kind of like impact how you were doing research at that time?
Yeah. It's so interesting because I mean, I had started, so pre-Gamergate, pre-Alex Feck, way pre-Alex Flag, pre-Gamergate, like I had done some game studies work. Like in the early days of the GI, like there was a game studies reading group that I was attending.
Very cool,
First Person Scholar had just started, so I was submitting articles to that. I was attending FPS meetings, and I was still writing the comics dissertation.
Wow.
I was like
Wow,
very
you were like
committed.
actively starting it. Wow.
I
okay,
was
that's cool.
I did my whole proposal.
Wow.
I was very reluctant to switch to games, and I think Gamergate actually had a huge part in why I did end up switching, because you know, I was sort of in that space already, and then I literally remember the day that, I don't want to say the day Gamergate started, because there was kind of a gradual thing. But the day after the Zoe post came out, which for anyone who knows, you know, and if you don't know, just don't look it up. It's not worth it. But the day after the Zoe post came out, we had a First Person Scholar meeting, and I went to that meeting like, this just happened, and this is going to change everything.
Yeah.
And some people were more receptive to the message than others. Some people were just very much like, well, this is not an academic thing. This is not part of academia. This is not going to affect academia. And I was like, this is going to affect everything about games academia. And yeah, well, there was some sort of controversy about that. Steve, who was the Steve Wilcox, who was the EIC of FPS at the time, was very receptive to that and did agree with me. And that was, we started sort of emailing back and forth about what was happening, everything that was happening. And then I ended up writing for FPS like the first piece about Gamergate. And as far as I know, that was maybe the first, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, and please send it to me if I am wrong, but I think that was the first piece of academic writing ever published about Gamergate.
Wow.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I mean, because I think that was the thing, is with First Person Scholar, the whole point was to be timely.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to get something out as quickly as possible. So I published that piece on First Person Scholar. Soon after, Catherine Cross came to us wanting to publish a piece, and we published that piece. And then not long after that, Steve, who was finishing his dissertation, asked me if I wanted to take over First Person Scholar as EIC. And considering everything that was going on, I was like, you know what? I just need to stop fighting it and just write the games dissertation that I feel like, it wasn't necessarily a dissertation I wanted to write, but it was the dissertation that I felt like the world needed.
I can see that on the title slide. Thank you for coming to my defense. This is the dissertation the world needs.
But yeah, I don't know. That's not really what I set out to do, but it was just, every time I had a conversation with people about it, like it was like, to write anything else about games, I feel like this needs to be addressed first.
So what did you kind of like take away from your experience at like FPS, especially since you eventually became like editor-in-chief? So what were you taking away from that at that time?
Jesus, so much. I would say like the top few things were that Steve and I had very different approaches, very different styles, and very, very similar values. And so I think that really helped us both figure out like who we were like as academics and as people, right? To be like, okay, if these are our values and this is what we want to accomplish, you know, what is the most efficient way of doing that? And obviously, we felt that academic journals were not the most efficient ways of communicating information, according to our values. And so we really wanted FPS to be a place that could like intervene in discourse that was happening. And for me, I think it really helped me realize that, you know, I kind of had never really felt smart like growing up or even in undergrad or even in my master's to an extent. Like I think part of that is always being around dudes who thought they were very smart and just feeling very small in comparison. And being on FPS really made me realize that like my ability to read or listen to or look at something very complex and summarize it in very like vernacular, simple language was not a skill that everyone had. And I think I'd really undersold that. I think I told myself that was something that anyone could do. And so my time on FPS, like writing, editing, managing, like all of that, like it really helped me hone that ability to discuss academic topics without using academic language.
What did your dissertation end up being about?
So my dissertation is in multiple sections. I kind of ended up doing a project-based dissertation, which is like kind of uncommon in English. The first chapter, or the first section, I should say, is very, you know, sort of like covering those definitions of, you know, like what is gamer culture, what is the gamer identity, what is Gamergate, those sorts of things, like laying that foundation. And then I had a chapter that's going to seem very weird to anyone who's not from the GI. That was kind of about Lord of the Rings, which, if you're not from the GI, is Neil's area of expertise. So I was looking at sort of how the history of the fantasy genre and the history of games, how they sort of interlock.
Very cool.
And how the history of gendered exclusion is sort of tied through there. So like women were excluded from the history of fantasy media long before games. And then I also had a chapter about first person scholar, and sort of like my experiences there when Gamergate was happening, but also just sort of in general, you know, being the only women in like mostly a group of dudes, gamer dudes, as much as I love them all, they were gamer dudes. And I also lastly had the other two chapters. One was about G.I. Janes, which was a of community that myself and some colleagues sort of tried to produce at the GI around the time Gamergate was happening. Basically, we were just trying to be like, okay, how can we get other women who play games together in a way that feels safe and comfortable and not stressful? And the chapter is about how that was like almost impossible and how hard it ended up being, and how we really didn't, like, we succeeded at other things we weren't aiming to do, but I don't think we succeeded at what we were aiming to do at all, because people got just like, it just was a weirdly controversial thing to do at the time.
Interesting.
Like now it just seems like, what are you even talking about? But at the time, the idea that women in games even had anything to complain about was so controversial. Like, I don't know how many times I heard, oh my God, like, are you still talking about this? Like, we already addressed this. Like, pre-Gamergate, people were sick of talking about gender in games.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let alone when I started talking about race in games, and then people got even more angry. And that's, I was just going to say, that's when the conclusion of my dissertation ended up being about, was about how there was like Nazis making videos about me on YouTube and stuff, because I was talking about how much racism there was in games culture, and people really didn't like that. So
yeah, and it's so interesting because this is so topical, because the Resident Evil 4 remake just came out. And a large part of the original game is that there's this female character. I forget her name. She's
Ashley.
Ashley. She's just a companion. And in the original, you could be a perv and just look up her skirt.
Yeah.
In the remake, they made it so that she actually kind of just like, if you're trying to do any sort of that, her character model just tries to like cover herself, and she is much more covered in this game, but like she even like shifts her body to make sure that you can't look anywhere near up her skirt, which I'm just like, great that, you know, you can't look up her skirt, but I'm like, it's still depressing that we still have to build these models in to prevent that from happening in the first place.
Well, and a lot of the sort of discussion we were having, you know, around 2012, like it was about stuff like that, and people just didn't really see why it was a problem. I actually remember the very first iteration of the GI podcast that never got off the ground was supposed to be just all the GI grad students getting together and doing episodes about their research and interesting topics. And we really wanted to record an episode that was like a Women in Games episode. And it never got off the ground because it was my best friend, Elise, and I, and two colleagues of ours who are people that I really like. But when we got to the brainstorming stage, they just started making a huge list of all the games they could think of that had women in them. And it got to the point where Elise and I had this conversation where I was like, I don't feel qualified to be on this podcast. Do you? And they were like, no.
Oh my word.
And it was just like, they had played so many more games than us. And they had so much to talk about, like, oh, this female character in this game, this female character in this game, that any sort of firsthand experience we had as women in games, it was such a weird time. And it's so hard to explain.
Yeah, no, that is super interesting.
Things have changed so much, and
Yeah.
also not at all.
Yeah.
Like, how would you say that game studies as a whole, as like a field, has changed since your time when you first started?
So I would say like the most massive thing would be that studying identity in relation to games is accepted at all. When I first started doing game studies, like I remember having conversations with people that were essentially like, well, it sounds like what you're interested in is women's studies with a focus on games.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's not
okay.
game studies, because game studies is within this framework of these debates that will not be named, and so on and so forth. You know, I just a huge part of why I didn't join game studies for so long was because I did look at the authors that were being put in front of me, and I was like, I don't have anything in common with these people. And it was only later that I started reading, you know, other like women and queer people in games studies that I was like, oh, like you can do that. Like Adrian Shaw was probably the biggest one for me. And now 10 years later, I am editing a book that has like a chapter from Adrian Shaw in
That's
it,
so cool.
where Adrian Shaw talks about how they have never felt like an accepted part of game studies. And which is crazy, because to me that was my gate opening
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
game studies, you
Yeah.
know. So just knowing that those other women also felt the same way, like they weren't really part of the field, which is nuts when they are seen as having made such important contributions now.
Yeah. I guess they probably feel the same way that you did when you were doing FPS, right? It's just like, I'm going to carve out my space. And
Yeah.
it's going to be uncomfortable, but I have to.
And I'll
things
just
like
figure
that.
it out in
Yeah.
retrospect.
Yeah, because I imagine. So I was not on this continent. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. When Gamergate was happening, so I don't really like. I wasn't on the internet, so I have no idea
Yeah.
really what it was. But I can't imagine like going on YouTube and seeing people attacking you and right, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff is so bizarre to think about happening.
Yeah, I would say from like 2012 to 2018, there was like no point in time where there were not people attacking me on the
That's so
internet.
weird.
And it was just, I don't know how to explain it other than it just became completely normal.
That's such a terrible thing to say, though, right? Like, yeah, I got used to it.
I
Like,
think
you
it's
shouldn't have to get used to something.
I think
like
it's a larger part of the conversation of, I think academics are not, like, a lot of them are just not at all like prepared for the media backlash that comes out, because this is a topic that I constantly see in my own research, because I am doing that kind of like misinformation social media aspect of, there is a complete like disconnection between what academics are doing and how it's taken up and spun around by traditional
Yeah.
media, and those two worlds are so not in touch with each other that it creates like an absolute maelstrom of just a disastrous on levels.
Around 2018, I like literally just stopped doing media interviews because I'd had so many bad experiences at that point. that unless the person who was asking to interview me worked for a publication in games, I would say no. Because the people who worked in games had the contextual knowledge to know what could happen.
Yeah.
And the people outside of games didn't really understand. So, you know, there was the point that like my turning point where I like kind of got off Twitter and everything was that something that I had done, I can't even remember what now, had been mentioned on the InfoWars website.
Oh boy.
Oh.
And I was
That's a
like,
trip back in time.
I don't want to be a degree separated from Alex Jones. I was like, I want to have kids someday.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
I don't
my
want to have to worry
goodness.
about the safety of my children. And like, that was like a big part of why I didn't. I think this is the thing, is that while I believe that academics should make their knowledge accessible so that everyone has access to it, the flip side of that coin, obviously, is that making your knowledge and yourself accessible means there's a huge backlash. But that backlash is there in part because there's been this massive vacuum where academic knowledge has been walled off from people for so long.
Yeah.
And so we have a massive problem with misinformation and disinformation.
I was trying to explain, I taught a game studies class last term, and I was trying to explain to my students why to read like a Washington Journal article, you need to pay $3, but you can read all the Fox News you want for free. They didn't get it.
And there, it's hard to find the workarounds to get
Yeah,
around those
I was like, I don't want to
paywalls,
step
'cause
on anybody's toes because you're pretty young in your academic careers and your critical thinking's not all there. But I'm like, you don't see what I see in
Yeah.
these two examples?
Yeah, and it's like
It's
it
really
requires
tricky.
not only the media literacy but also the technical literacy.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Well, and I feel like this is all I talk about lately. But I'm reading Naomi Klein's Doppelganger right now. And there is this section where she talks about the two-way glass as a sort of metaphor for how people in more progressive circles tend to ignore what's happening on the right, whereas the right is paying very close attention to us. So she uses her example of Steve Bannon, which is especially interesting to me because Steve Bannon was very involved in Gamergate.
Yeah.
And now I'm like reading this book about how he was involved in the Trump presidency and in anti-vax campaigns and all this other stuff. And she discusses how, like, you know, if any of us said we were paying attention to anything Steve Bannon was doing, people would be like, ew, why? But like Steve Bannon is paying very close attention to what the left is doing because that helps him as a political strategist.
Yeah.
And part of the issue that I feel like the left and progressive circles are having is that we don't want to even look at what the right is doing. And if we do, it's to mock or ridicule in a way that I guess just doesn't take it seriously. And it's funny because I did this documentary with the CBC about my dissertation, and when I had to do the like radio interviews promoting it, I was thinking I was going to talk about games and stuff, but what they wanted me to talk about was why I wasn't surprised that Trump was elected. And that's literally what I talked about on the CBC for like an entire day.
Wow.
Because they were just like, what do you mean you weren't surprised? Everyone was surprised. And I was like, no, I'm studying games. I wasn't surprised at all. I feel like everyone studying games wasn't surprised. And I've gotten really weirdly off topic. I don't remember what the question was.
I'm going to keep us in the dark for a little bit. Did you have any awareness of Comicsgate around 2017, 2018?
Yeah, definitely.
So Comicsgate was the comics version of Gamergate.
Oh, fabulous.
So
Inspired by.
yeah,
goodness.
the naming
Offshoot
conventions are all the
of.
same. So there was a group of female editors at Marvel
Okay.
who were editing. It was kind of around the time where there were a lot of like Thor was Jane Foster. You know, a lot of the legacy characters were being adapted over. Like Miss Marvel had just come out, stuff like this. And so Heather Antos, who was the kind of main editor behind all this stuff, she took a picture with a bunch of other female editors and put it on Twitter, and it just like launched this hatred campaign against Marvel and all that kind of stuff. And it was like 2-ish years, maybe something like that of just essentially the exact same kind of thing. The person at the behind it was awful. I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff, and it was weird because I was making comics, like that's what I do, and there was a huge period of time where I would get emails from people being like, hey, can you letter my comics? And I'd have to respond saying, are you a comics skater or are you not?
Oh.
And those were hard conversations to have and stuff like that. It was really weird. There'd be multiple times where I would do some stuff and then I would see where they're posting on Twitter and be like, oh yeah, no, like you need to delete that because I don't give you permission to use my work because you're part of that stuff. It was really weird. So like listening to your experience where you were like in it and I was adjacent trying to keep myself away and like protect what I was doing and stuff. It's very interesting because I'm also married to a comics creator. So like that was also interesting to navigate. But it was just weird to be like, I know that Gamergate was this big deal. And I think that what you said of like, of course it changed academia, but it also changed the industry. And right, like you can't ever really escape it. And I feel like comics, it's almost kind of been swept under the rug in a weird way. Yeah, it definitely wasn't as mainstream as
I think you had to
Gamergate.
like know people who were making comics to really know it was happening or be like extremely online. Though, like, you know, it was, if you weren't a comics fan or a comics creator, I don't know how much you would have heard about it.
Because
Like,
it's not.
the only movements I remember hearing about was it the Clinton Barton initiative, where I think I'm trying to remember if that's the correct name of it, but like people were drawing male comic characters
In the female costume?
in the
I
female
remember that, I think.
pose.
Wasn't it just called the Hawkeye Initiative?
The Hawkeye
Hawkeye
Initiative. There it
Initiative.
is. Just like showing how weirdly sexualized female characters are in comics.
Yeah.
And that was definitely, I think that was like 2011. So that was
okay.
definitely like in the
That was
sort of like
yeah.
build up to all
before
this
there was like a
stuff.
backlash to the backlash. Yeah.
Well, and I think like to sort of put all this together, it's like essentially all this comes down to is people feeling like thing X that they love is ruined by the involvement of a certain type of person, primarily women, but also, you know, men that they qualify as not really men, you know, white knights and so on and so forth. And, you know, now we're so used to hearing like, oh, thing X was spoiled by the woke agenda. But that language was not commonplace until like 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard someone on the news say the word social justice warrior, I thought I was going to pass out because I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Or it's like right now with politicians using the word woke agenda, and I'm like, can we stop this? I need to stop here. You don't know what woke is. You can't define it, okay?
No. But it is smart
Yeah.
because it is a way to encapsulate for that whole huge population of people what they hate.
Yes.
Even if
Yeah.
it means nothing,
Yeah.
it means something to all of them. And I feel like when people are like, oh, Gamergate led to Trump getting elected, I'm like, that is such a gross oversimplification. It makes me so mad. But what did happen was that what was basically the like culture wars that were happening in Gamergate demonstrated strategies and rhetoric and tactics that are still being used to this day in all other culture wars, you know? And I see it every day. Someone will be like, oh, did you see that they got so-and-so fired by doing X? And I think, God, they did that in 2012, like with the IBM ads on Kotaku or whatever it was. Like,
So are there any games that you just like can't go back to because of they've been scarred by these experiences?
no.
I mean, the way that you talk about this, like obviously there's been some trauma and stuff, but like you don't seem like you're because you're not out of game studies, right? And you're a very avid gamer still, so you're just kind of like, yeah, the aughts were rough. We have Tears of the Kingdom now.
It was a thing that happened.
Yeah.
But here we are
Right,
today.
it's
Games have continued.
you know, Panic at the Disco's second album was kind of rough, but their third one was okay, or something like that, right? It's just,
I mean, I never wanted to be like a feminist in games. I never wanted to be like a professional games feminist. I was not interested in that. But it was like a role that was like almost like freaking hoisted upon me.
You're a woman, you're doing games, you're a feminist. Yeah.
Yeah, and like obviously like I am a feminist, but it was, you know, like there's so much more, like I was so much more interested in doing like more complex, more intersectional research than that. But at the time, the narrative was like women in games, women in games, women in games.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason I'm just like so chill about it now is because like I made that decision to leave academia, to stop doing academic publishing to stop doing academic writing, and I feel completely at peace with it.
There you go. That's great.
But if you had to talk to me like 2.5 years ago, I was like if you had talked to me in 2020 when I was like unemployed and unsure what the hell I was going to do with the rest of my life, like
Yeah.
I was still like an anxious mess about it.
Yeah.
I was like so burnt out.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like now I've come up back around the other side.
Well, let's talk about that a bit more, because you are in not what we would consider to be like a traditional like academic role. You're not in an active you're not in an active like professorship like position, but you are still like academic adjacent right now. So
Yeah.
how would you say like that has been treating you since you kind of entered into this new career?
I mean, to me, it's the perfect fit. I mean, it's so hard for me to talk about this in a way that doesn't just sound like I'm like talking about my job. Like, oh, I have the perfect job. Everything's so great. Like I'm sucking up or something. But
thank you, GI, for sponsoring this podcast.
yeah, I swear to God, I'm being honest. I did not have a good time post-graduation. My postdocs were some of the roughest years of my life mentally. And it really made me unsure like how I was ever going to use my skills in academia, because I thought I had found the perfect podcast that was like the perfect fit, or podcast. Oh my God. The perfect
You're
postdoc.
here. You're back. You're welcome.
This is the perfect podcast for me. I thought I'd found the perfect postdoc for me, and it wasn't a good fit at all. And I didn't have a good experience. And then I was just kind of like, but I didn't know that I wanted to do something where I wasn't completely torn away from not just games, but research. Like, I do care genuinely so much about research. Like, I didn't want to work at the university outside of research. Like, I have friends who work at the Career Center, the Writing Center, and, like, they love their jobs, but, like, that's just not for me.
Right.
So a job like I have here at the GI, where I talk to different GI members about the research, and I help translate that and disseminate that. And, you know, to me, that's exactly the sort of thing that I hope I can keep doing for a very long time. Because I feel like I have this like superpower and I'm actually getting to use it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was in academia, it's like, not only did I not get to use it, like if I used it, I was gold.
That's kind of like interesting, because you're tying over those skills you started picking up in FPS, that kind of like knowledge translation and mobilization. And how does that like play out in your day to day now within your current job?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think that I actually developed a lot of these skills because I am dyslexic, which is probably pretty strange to a lot of people, because they're like, oh, you can't have a PhD in English and be dyslexic. And let me tell you, you can. You just spend a lot of time editing. So much more time than anyone else. But I think because of that, like, I really struggled with a lot of academic writing. You know, I would get assigned these readings, and it would take me so long to distill what the author actually meant. And I kind of thought everyone else was just reading it and getting what the author was saying, like, boom, just like that. But I think it turned out a lot of people didn't know what they were talking about either.
It's so dense.
It was so dense, but I was like very obsessed with like, how can I explain this to myself in a way that allows me to participate in class? And I think that became those skills that I had that got useful around FPS, around the time I was working for FPS, and that I still get to use today at the GI. But when I was trying to use them in my dissertation, or not my dissertation so much, but in journal articles I wrote or other things, like I got a lot of feedback like, wow, your writing is really strong, but it's too journalistic, or wow, this is like so compelling, but it's not academic writing. And then I would push people to be like, okay, but what is academic writing? Like, what makes the writing academic? And like, I would just get all sorts of terrible advice, like read the New Yorker, and then you'll be able to figure out a style that you like. And I was like, ugh. But still,
is the New Yorker not just journalism? Like, it's not academic, is it?
Right? Right? Like, or and like, it's this is the thing, is that the advice doesn't make any sense. It's contradictory.
Yeah.
Like what they were really saying is that there was no, in their opinion, I was writing without flourish. In my opinion, I was writing with a different
to
type
be accessible
of flourish. Yeah. Like I think my favorite kind of prose can be super dense while being completely accessible.
Right.
So like there's a lot being said, but it's very easy to understand. I mean, like that's what like this is such a bad example. That's what Gilmore Girls is like. They talk like 1,000 miles a second. They're making like 600 references, but like you're not like, I don't get it. Like you get it.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
For the 3 Gilmore Girl fans who are listening to this podcast, they're like, yeah, great job, Emma. I get
That was the
it.
show
I'm there
I
with
watched
you.
my mother and my sisters all the time. Is our show.
So I went with the updated reference because what I really wanted to say was Golden Girls.
When you said Gilmore Girls, I thought Golden Girls. My wife had
Yeah.
just finished rewatching it, so I was like,
No
I know exactly what you're
way.
talking
I just
about.
finished watching it. But yeah, dense and accessible.
Did you know that? Please remind me of the characters. Not Betty White. Not the.
Dorothy, Blanche, Sophia?
I think it's Dorothy. Dorothy's the really
Dorothy?
tall one.
Yeah.
She was like a World War II tank driver.
Yeah.
Is that crazy?
Yeah,
That's
and
my word.
and then she was like also after she was like an activist.
Yeah.
She was very cool.
And then
Yeah.
Well, it's like the show was very progressive for its time. That's
Yeah.
what I heard about. It was like
I watched some
super
of those
progressive.
episodes. I was like, this was made back then.
This
is
like stuff you wouldn't even find on TV today.
Even today.
This is very strange because I'm like T-minus like 4 days from my son's first birthday party, which is going to be Golden Girls themed. This is not a joke. It's true. I purchased a giant gold banner that says "Thank you for being a friend."
That's amazing. I want to circle back and talk about comics. What
Okay.
were you interested in about comics?
Okay. So I love comics in general.
Okay.
I especially love memoir, autobio comics.
Okay.
But what I was really interested in studying was comics pornography. So my proposed original dissertation was actually going to focus on Alan Moore's Lost Girls.
Okay.
Which is sort of like a metatextual retelling of Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, and like couple other influential stories in a very Alan Moore sort of way. But it was actually a collaboration with his wife.
Oh, interesting.
So she was the artist and he was the writer. And it was pretty controversial when it came out. Like, I remember people literally telling me not to take it across the border with me when I went to give
my
talks.
goodness.
Yeah, because it had been confiscated from other comics lovers.
Wow.
Because it was quite R-rated. But I was really interested in the idea of how pornography could be created through comics in a way that was more feminist, more accessible, more literary, more complex, just sort of all these things. Like when you take away the physical actors and the means of production that those actors might find themselves in, and you have, in this case, like a husband and wife who are, in it for the love of the game. I don't know how else to put it. Like, how does that change, like, the nature of pornography? And, Alan Moore actually wrote a book that was like a meditation on pornography and how he felt that pornography could be and should be art, but so often it's not.
Yeah.
So that's what I came here planning to study. And I wrote my proposal. And then my proposal got approved, and I said, well, now for something completely different. And I proposed an entirely new dissertation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Alan Moore.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's really fascinating.
Is there anything that you keep up with in terms of like comics these days?
I feel like I still read like here and there, but I don't read the amount of comics I used to by any means. Like I have a lot of friends who are in webcomics, so like obviously I read their comics. I won't shout anyone out because then I'll feel like I'm not shouting out all my friends and then I'll get in trouble. But most recently I read Ducks by Kate Beaton, which is as incredible as everyone says. Like there's something about autobio comics that kills me. Probably like It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken by Seth is probably one of my favorite comics of all time. Yeah.
We're planning our autobio comic.
Wow.
It's called My Hemorrhoids Make It Hard to Fart. coming sometime in our lifetime.
Well, if you
That's
need a
the-
beta reader,
Oh, my word.
I'm your gal.
That's the post-child experience as well for us. Did you ever, and I'm not saying this as a superhero fan, but
Yeah.
like, were you involved with like mainstream stuff? Like when Comicsgate hit, did you kind of know who the kind of players were in terms of?
I was
was
never
happening
like a
there?
huge mainstream comics
Okay, yeah.
person. I was like, mostly interested in indie comics.
Yeah.
Although, like, I did really like when people like say Sam Keith would do Batman, you know, like, and
Yeah,
it would get
the
a bit
weird
weird.
twists, yeah. Were you like a Neil Gaiman fan then? Like somebody who comes in and like
I
shake
like
things
Neil
up? and
Gaiman. He
things
wasn't
like
like
that?
my main thing, but like
Yeah.
I was really like very like this sort of like underground alt comics. Like
Okay.
that was my like back when TCAF was TCAF
Uh-huh.
and was good before TCAF got bad. The Toronto Comics and Arts Festival for anyone listening. Yeah, that was my jam. I guess Jeff Lemire is probably like the
Oh,
most like
Well,
Jesus.
it's
the
Jeff
most
Oh,
like
okay. I have a story for you.
the most like normal ass comics writer that I ever read.
The first comic convention we went to was the Forest City Comic Con in London,
Yeah.
and he was like the big name that was going there to draw all the stuff.
London, England, or London, Ontario?
Ontario.
Okay.
And so I go up, and I was really obsessed with like getting all my stuff signed back then.
Yeah.
That was like the one thing that I was like, oh, I want signed signatures for everything.
Mhm.
So I get book signed, and I give him some of the stuff that I've been making. And then we go back to our table and, you know, walking around, or not, we're not walking around, but people are walking around, and this old lady comes over and she's like, oh, this is such nice artwork. And we have this like half-hour conversation with this nice old lady. And we're like, oh yeah, so like, why are you here? Right? Because it felt
Yeah.
really weird that this
Yeah.
just like white-haired lady was walking around by herself. She's like, oh, my son Jeff is here. He's a guest.
Oh
And
my,
like-
we're just
You had this
casually.
conversation with Jeff
I was like,
Lemire's mom.
what? And so I got her to sign my book.
Yeah,
Aw,
nice.
that's
So now I have a
nice.
copy of Descender Volume 1 signed by Jeff Lemire and his mom.
Oh, that's so nice.
It's so funny.
Oh,
We love
that's
to tell that
nice.
story.
Yeah.
So I did poke about Tears of the Kingdom.
Mhm.
So what are you playing these days? And like, how have your gaming habits changed, especially as being a parent, a
Mm-hmm.
new parent? But just like with how accessible games are.
Yeah, so I mean, you both know the story, but I'll tell it to the podcast.
Yeah.
A couple days ago, I was putting on my socks at approximately
Most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable position as a parent can be.
7:05 a.m. I was putting on my socks, and my child was loose in my bedroom, which is not normally a thing, but we were running behind, so I had my kid with me while I was getting dressed. And he grabbed my Switch and took the 10 steps to my bathroom and put it directly with no hesitation into the toilet.
Oh, that's so painful.
And we must note, was it a limited edition or just like exclusive Animal Crossing? It was the
It
Animal
was my
Crossing
Animal
variant.
Crossing edition Switch,
Yeah.
which was upsetting because I have a launch Switch, and it's like, I mean, I like my launch Switch too,
We
but
should mod that one.
the launch one?
Yeah.
Well, but now that's the only Switch I have.
We should mod it.
You have to protect the one
should,
switch
yeah.
that's there.
I mean, the Switch 2.
It'll be this year.
It'll be here. It'll be there here this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so previous to that, I had basically only played Tears of the Kingdom for like since Tears of the Kingdom came out, because you know when you're a parent, you only can really. It's very hard to focus on more than one thing at a time. So I'm very close to being finished Tears of the Kingdom, but I am like a person who has to do every shrine, every side quest. So that's why I would have been devastated if my save data had been lost, because I would have had to do all that over again. But previous to having the baby, I played Pentiment, which I really, really enjoyed. I was like, it was one of those moments where I was like, I can't believe this video game got made and is popular.
Yeah.
Which is also how I felt like when Night of the Woods came out, when Gone Home came
Yeah.
out. Like that moment where you're just like, wow, a game that I like this much exists despite all the bullshit.
Well, and I think that's the prevalence of Steam.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what maybe a subtext to the question was like, we can get games anywhere.
Yeah.
So that means that making games is so much easier because there's an audience everywhere,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not just Sega or Nintendo or whatever back in the day, right?
Yeah, and like in general, I do think too that, I mean, even compared to 2 years ago, I think, you know, one of the last, or maybe the last conference presentation I gave was about building my gaming PC, and what that was like as a woman, and how strangely gendered the experience was. And how I was seeing, though, at the time, this like small emergence of like female content creators on YouTube, on Instagram, who are posting their PC builds, their PC setups, their PC accessories. And now that's like massive. Like there is like Instagram and YouTube are just covered with like my cute pink PC setup. But I mean, look at me build a PC in a dollhouse. Like it's like such a huge thing. And I just think what I want is for like girls growing up not to like learn, oh, girls are bad at games before they even ever play a game.
Yeah.
You know, like learning that shit in kindergarten, and then you're coming at it like, you know, and then every time you go to play a game forever, before you sit down, you have to say, just so you know, I'm not any good.
Right.
Like it listen for that, because once you notice it, you'll notice that people do, like, especially women do it constantly. So yeah, to just not have that expectation, to just be like, oh yeah, like games are fun, and not have all that baggage that I had growing up, that would be very nice.
Do you have any games that you would recommend to the listeners? Or no, what? How did we used to? Well, answer that question. I'll ask you the other one.
So other than the ones that I just mentioned, Pentiment, Night in the Woods, Gone Home, which I feel like everyone's played. I played a game recently called The Excavation of Hobbs Burrow, which was like a folk horror point and click game. Very strange game that I enjoyed very much. Really good if you like loved those like Lucas Arts, like King's Quest games back in the day. Like very much just like those vibes. Also Inscription.
I need to get around to that. Have you played Inscription?
No, I have not, but I've like heard it as like it's been recommended so many times at this point.
I finally got my partner to play Inscription, and like I'm talking like he has like thousands of like Magic cards and Pokemon cards in his office, and I'm like, you know, this is a game for people who love it's trading card games.
It's like meta, and it kind of pokes about the genre of
like it's
stuff,
basically just like a love letter to deck building games, you know? And then there's also like some horror elements, and there's some bits that are like a bit like Pokemon Blue, and
interesting.
I never heard the Pokemon stuff before.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I really, really, really recommend. Oh, also Tunic.
Yeah.
Anyone who hasn't, if you like Zelda and you haven't played Tunic, if you don't like Zelda and you haven't played Tunic, well, you're probably not gonna like Tunic. So just don't worry about it.
This is Zelda fans only, clearly.
But if you like Zelda and you haven't played Tunic, you are doing yourself a disservice. Just get a notebook, get a pen.
Yeah.
Don't look anything up.
Yeah.
And play it right now.
One of my sisters, we have a group chat, my brother, her, and me, and we're always like, so where are you in Breath of the Wild?
Yeah.
Right, like we'll check in, and then he finished Tunic and was like, you need to play Tunic.
Yeah.
So I'll add to the list.
Yeah.
But you know, Stardew Valley exists, and so does Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the
Stardew,
Kingdom.
those updates. Oh my goodness.
One thing I will say about Tunic is like, if you're at a point where, and this happened to me a lot during my dissertation, where I got to a point where I was so frustrated with everything, where I was like, do I even like video games?
I've had that question a few times lately.
Like what? I just feel like you've lost that connection, like, and you need to like reignite that spark and remember why you loved games to begin with. Tunic is the game for you. To heal your inner child.
Is there anything that you're looking forward to besides the Switch 2, so you can buy a new Switch in the upcoming year? Any games on your radar?
Have they announced?
They haven't said yet.
Odds are it'll be this like holiday season.
Yeah.
Oh, the holiday season.
This Christmas,
they might announce something for the
Yes.
next Nintendo conference.
So odds are, right, we're recording this in January. Well, it'll be released in January.
It'll be released in February.
For really around the world. There'll probably be a direct in February.
Okay.
But we probably won't see the Switch until summer.
Yeah.
Right? Because it would be when the E3 normally would be.
Yeah, and
That's when they
RIP
would
to a
push
real
it.
one.
And then you'll get Switch 2 holiday season.
Switch 2.
$5.49 USD probably is my guess.
It's going to be like, definitely for sure. So when I paid for my Switch
You got a
last
cheapish
year,
one.
I got an OLED, but
Yeah.
and plus I got Breath of the Wild on top of that.
Right.
So I paid over $600 for both of those.
It's good value.
Yeah. Well, I've got like a console now that'll last me like forever. Like I don't intend on buying a Switch 2. Like that's just redundant to me.
Well, yeah, there's such a huge catalog that you have access to. Like, I don't think I would have bought a Switch 2 if it wasn't for the toilet incident. But now I have an excuse.
Toilet
well, I was going to buy those pink Joy-Cons they just announced, though. I'm not going to lie. So
now you just got to keep the Switch 2 away from the toilet. So
I'd say I'm looking forward to the new Princess Peach game.
Yes.
But I was really looking forward to the last Princess Peach game on the DS. It was very disappointed.
Yeah.
So
no,
low expectations. That's where I'm
I
at.
think this game is called Coral Island or something like that.
Moonstone Island.
Or it's one
one?
that just came out. It had a very successful Kickstarter. Let me just look it up real quick because it's a very successful Kickstarter, and it's like Stardew Valley, but Coral Island. Yes, Coral Island.
It is Coral Island. Okay.
It's kind of like it's like another farm sim game, like Stardew Valley-esque, but not in the same art style. So I've heard that one's really good.
Speaking of things that are very different from 10 years ago, if 10 years ago I had had this, like when Stardew Valley came out, it was like, oh my God, you can have a game that's like Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing. Like it was mind blowing for all of us. And now there are 7 million games that are across of, they're not even Harvest Moon likes anymore.
Yeah.
They're Stardew Valley likes.
Yeah, exactly.
You have no idea how much I enjoy a good farming simulator. Like I don't care about people are dating who in the village. I'm like I don't care. I'm here to
Let me grow
maximize
my
the
crops.
crops.
Yeah.
So you've never married Abigail?
I'm married, but like it was lower on my list of priorities of things I needed to achieve. The self-sustaining farm.
I
was
started
one
playing
of them.
Stardew Valley and I was like, that girl right there, she's the one for me.
She's the one.
I'm not doing anything else. I'm just feeding her pumpkins until she marries me. That's my girl.
I have yet to choose mine. I'm in the same boat as you where I'm like, I gotta get to the mines. I gotta get to the whatever.
The farm needs to be there.
I've never been able to figure that stuff out. The only one that I think this was Harvest Moon Back to Nature. I think that was the PS1 one.
Yeah.
I think Karen was the one that I was like, yes, please marry me.
Marry me.
Never gave me the time of day. Very cool. I would ask where people could find you online, but I don't think that's a thing you want anymore.
I do have a website still, www.emmavossen.com, and there's a contact form there if you want to contact me. But I'm not really on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, well, who is?
Not really.
Who is these days?
Yeah.
We're still calling it Twitter, and it's been rebranded as X.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
There you go. We're at that stage now.
Yes, honestly.
That's how much social media has fallen apart.
This is my bet right now, as someone who has to watch the social media landscape constantly, is LinkedIn is where the academics are likely going to go, but it's a guess between who's going to take over the short form blogging, which Twitter used to serve, and it's a matter of where the journalist's going to go. So most of them I'm seeing right now are going to Blue Sky Social.
I was a Twitter addict back in the day. I used to live on Twitter. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
Well, now you have Tears of the Kingdom.
In the before times,
Yeah.
you know.
Hyrule.
It's like when you walk past your old apartment. That's how I feel when I click on x.com.
Now it's just like watching it as like a train wreck in motion, and it's just like, well, I can't look away now. The good stuff is just happening.
Thank you for joining us, Emma.
No problem.
It was wonderful to hear all these stories. We probably should do a part 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because, like, there's so much history that you have experienced that I don't
Yeah,
think we
could
don't
do
get
a
normally
history
with
of the
guests.
GI,
Or
Yeah.
even
it's
like,
all up here.
or even like the stuff that you're currently keeping up on, especially with like the book project that you were on.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
we
that's
didn't
true.
touch
I
on
should
that.
probably say that I have a book coming out this year. It's called Game Studies Historiographies. I edited it with a couple great colleagues of mine, and there are a lot of amazing people in it. I won't try to list them all because there's way too many, but there is a landing page for it now online. So Google Game Studies Historiographies. You can spell historiographies, I believe.
It's
in
as it sounds. Sound out the syllables. My 4-year-old could do it. You can do it too. All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.